pleasure to be here. I spend entirely too much time on the road at lots of conferences, and I think that this is just one of the best ones that I go to every year. So what I want to, just to give this a little bit of context about where it is that we're going as in our industries and our professions, is to talk about the past, the present, and the future. And one of the things conceptually, and you need to kind of go on a ride with me for this, is to understand that not everybody lives in the present. You know what I'm talking about? Like there are some people that you may know, they're in your office, you see them at the same time, but they're not in the present. So there are some folks that are living in the past, some folks who live in the present, but then there's also the flip side of that. There's some people who are in the present and they're living in the future. So we're going to be talking about some of the things that are happening today and also what's going to be happening tomorrow. Now the past of all the things is perhaps the easiest. We know exactly what it is. The present and the future is a little bit more complicated. As we look at marketing and communication, and this is relevant for whatever industry you're in, oftentimes the way that businesses and organizations used to think about this is in a very compartmentalized way. There was marketing or communication in the big picture, and then things fit into different boxes. Advertising, brochures, if there's site selection information, or meeting businesses. The reality is that that's not what's happening. Oh, and I should also point out, some of those things included things like websites or email. But now, really what's happening is that there's really more of a continuum of the offline and the online. And all of those neat boxes now are fitting across both of those spaces. Now there's some things that were always online. There was never an offline website, right? And there are things like direct mail, and it's very clear that that's happening in a very tangible way. But so many of the things are moving actually in the direction of the online. So everything from site selection assistance, videos, what used to be on VHS or on a DVD are now showing up in places like YouTube. Even meeting businesses. This is something you say, oh, well, if I'm meeting someone, that means I must actually be in front of them. But now many of these meetings are happening online. Even for kind of one of the interesting trends that we're seeing is some of the familiarization tours that businesses are doing and site selectors are doing about communities are now occurring online in the same way that you can get a lot more done in the model that's used here at this conference through the type of speed dating that we were doing yesterday. You can do similar things when you're presenting your community online. Another major trend that's happening is this issue of how word of mouth is being transformed. The typical way in the past that folks have tried to influence folks is with the most powerful influencers, trying to be in tradition, and they did that through traditional plans. Of course, everybody, whether it's your business or your community, you'd love to be in the Wall Street Journal, right? But there's a narrow amount of folks that can get into that, and you can't control the message. The other strategy is advertising to the mass population, and that's what people are doing with TV and things like that. But of course, it's incredibly expensive, and it's not as targeted. So that's where you start to see kind of more niche spaces where people are getting higher value by focus on specific industries, or I guess even in TV specific shows. A new opportunity, though, is in the middle. What I'll talk about is the magic middle. And this is how you can influence the influencers. So people like domain experts, people who are very active online, thought leaders and opinion makers. And a great place for doing this is through the tools that are online, blogs, podcasts, social networks, viral marketing, and so on. Because these people here, they're influencing that final decision maker. So whether you are in this room and you report up to you're CEO of your company, or you are an economic developer, and you're trying to influence businesses to consider your community. This is a place. So let's pick some examples. So some of the folks who are site selectors in the room, they would fit into this magic middle because they are advisors to people who are making decisions. But they could also be people who are experts in an industry that you are in. Let's say that your community is pursuing plastics or biotech. Who are the thought leaders that influence the decision makers? These are important people to read. The other thing is, how do you become relevant at the moment of relevance? If you're, how is it that at the moment there's a decision being made that you can impact that decision? That's a very important thing, whatever the work is that you do. So as some background, and Ted mentioned this, in 2007 we were trying to understand, okay, with the changing nature of what's going on, how do we quantify it? How do we actually understand these trends and how they impact the work that we're doing? I would oftentimes go to conferences and people would, experts would get up and they'd say, well, 90% of site selectors, 70% of the corporate real estate profession, all these great numbers, like, oh wow, that's pretty important. And then I'd go up and I'd ask them, what study did that come from? They said, well, that's about what it feels like for me. And I said, you gave us an exact number for how you feel? So he said, okay, we've got to quantify this to really understand what's going on in the marketplace. We revisited it in 2009, and this was obviously as things got really terrible in the economy. And then this year, as kind of as dawn is breaking and things are getting better, he said, well, what's changed since the downturn? How are communities, economic development organizations, and site selectors responding to the new economic situation as we're emerging? And then also, specifically, how has social media impacted marketing and communication? I'll give you some background so you understand who was involved in the survey. The survey included people from every state in the country. This is the population of the areas. This is for economic developers and the areas that they serve. You can see a big chunk of 100 to a quarter of a million population, and then there's another decent spike in the 1 to 5 million. Likely these are the regional organizations and some states. Mostly from about a third from government and economic development corporations, and followed by chambers, public-private partnerships, and so on. These are the things that economic developers are most focused on right now. Top 3, business attraction, retention, expansion, then followed in the next group, entrepreneurial development, community development, and so on. Site selection assistance, you can see here, is about a quarter of economic development organizations have it as one of their top priorities. So in terms of marketing effectiveness, there is greater optimism about the effectiveness of the work that economic development organizations are doing. People are much happier in terms of the results. So may I have a volunteer? Anybody will answer my next question without even knowing what it is. Perfect. What is your name?
Jeff Pappas.
Jeff. So Jeff, what was the most effective marketing strategy? And for the guys next to him, please don't help them. What was the most effective marketing strategy out there? Was it trade shows? Was it slogans? Or was it internet website?
No coaching.
No coaching.
Is there none of the above? You know what? Yeah, that's right. Internet website. My blogging and my articles that I've written have really attracted a lot of interest from prospects as well as from clients.
All right. So and a testimonial to go with it. So that is. I don't know how you knew the answer, but that is good. So as we look at this, so these are the things that were working well, and so website came out at the very top. But there's also, and this is something that I was talking about in the book, this whole idea. I mean, I definitely don't want you to leave this talk thinking, oh, the internet is the solution, because as you look, it's not all just the internet. So this is called spark lines. This is a somewhat confusing graph to look at, but it actually what you can see is, so this is over a 4-year period. So when we first did the survey 4 years ago, what you see is just kind of generally, as the downturn happened, everybody, like the results weren't as good. People were less happy with how things were going. And then now we're back up to approximately where we were in 2007. One of the interesting things about this that you'll see is that site selection consultants really fell out of favor in terms of effectiveness during the downturn. So you see they were the kind of the third most effective target for results of organizations. They dropped down to fifth and now are back up to third. So it's interesting to see that because that's where one of the most dramatic shifts. There's some other ones which I'll talk about a little bit more also. So what I mentioned before is that if you look here in terms of also effectiveness, so much more is becoming face-to-face too. So you're both virtual and personal. I call this, it's about being high-tech and high-touch. In fact, I think a good argument can be made that as we become more virtual, the personal matters. Like having time at this conference to truly get to know somebody, what matters to them, something that's not about a quick email conversation. So the personal continues to grow and be very important. In terms of budgeting, where economic developers are spending a lot of their money is in websites. But see, once again, personal contact is mattering. Trade shows and conferences, out-of-town meetings with businesses. And if you look at it, you're actually, these out-of-town meetings with businesses, again, it's something that you're doing here, relative to the investment, it's getting much higher level of effectiveness than, probably like these mega trade shows. The other interesting thing that showed on this kind of low cost, high value was social media. People are putting very little money, especially because much of social media is free, and getting very high effectiveness. There was only 2 things that communities agreed that they knew they were going to invest money in over the next 5 years, both of which were online, which is website and social media. So another volunteer. Yes, Matt. You like to participate? Okay, so Matt. Matt, compared to the dot-com boom days, how much do businesses spend on online advertising? Is it less? Is it the same? Or is it a lot more? A lot more, again, isn't it a second perfect answer?
This question is easier than mine, man.
It's a competitive room. So what happened is as people are thinking about online advertising, so this is the peak, this is the dot-com boom days and $8 billion in online advertising. Then it starts going down, and all the people said this whole internet thing, it's not really probably going to work out. People are spending too much. It's a waste of money, and this is proving that we're right, that the internet advertising doesn't have legs, which was right up until it was really, really wrong. So what happened is now, so it grows, see again, downturn, a little bit of a decrease, but then on the upswing last year. We're now more than 3 times the online spending than we were at the height of the dot-com boom. 3 times. So on the trend line, you can see online advertising, which is still, again, not at the top, but you see the rate in which it's increasing is significant. And this is an opportunity. And this is an opportunity for communities. And I'm going to show you even more data that's kind of surprising about how site selectors are responding to this. So I think there's a big opportunity for all of you in online advertising. And my company doesn't do online advertising, but there are companies that do. In terms of industry targeting, so this is, again, this is the demographic makeup of the people who participated in the survey. About a third from cities, a third from counties, 20% from regions, then the rest from large organizations. But you see the trend actually is that everybody's going for bigger areas. They're not staying local by any means. A third are focusing on global companies, about a quarter nationwide. So our reach is much broader than just a local focus. So one of the key findings of our analysis, because we did 2 surveys, one was of economic developers, one was of site selectors, and they get more into the site selectors now, is that the targets were pretty, there was some overlap, but there are also some significant differences, and this is important in the work that we're doing. So this is ranked by the most targeted industries of economic development organizations. You can see at the top 3 are all manufacturing, but advanced and alternative and renewable are their top targets. And what you can see, those that are in the darker gray are the areas where there's the greatest disparity of focus between what economic developers were focusing on and what the corporate real estate professionals are focusing on. So for example, aerospace and aviation is a pretty high priority for economic developers, but not so much for corporate real estate pros. Now let's look at it in the opposite direction, which is what are the biggest targets for corporate real estate pros and site selectors? Number 1, corporate headquarters, followed by traditional manufacturing, distribution, call centers, finance, business services. So again, gray is where there's the greatest disparity. You can actually see there's some things on one list that aren't even on the top list of the other. So where the overlap is in things like manufacturing, traditional manufacturing, distribution and wholesale, and information technology and high tech. But you need to understand this, because if you are trying to focus on specific industries, you need to see if, in fact, you're aligned. So we also wanted to know, well, how do site selectors and corporate real estate pros get their information, gather it, and what influences them? So we did a survey. It included a number of companies. These are some examples of them. Here's a longer list. I actually know there are people in the room whose companies participated in this survey. The site selectors, their focus is significantly broader geographically than the economic developers. Nearly 60% are focused on multiple countries. And the folks who are in the survey are all, you're seeing about a third site selection consultants, another third corporate real estate focusing on one company, and then about a quarter focusing on multiple companies. Also, senior people. So only 15% are lower than a vice president in this analysis. So where do they get their information about communities? At the very top is brokers. So for those of you who are economic developers, the brokers that are in your community are your ambassadors who are providing information. The relationship that you have with them is important. And for those of you who are on the corporate real estate side, this is a good resource about local information for you. But you also see on the online side, not much farther behind is the resources of the economic development organization itself. While we were doing research and putting this together, we got an email about this really cool report that came out. And we said, oh, this is actually asking some questions that we didn't have the answers to. And if you guys haven't seen this, this is an analysis done by Business Facilities. And what they looked at was this issue of location directories, and a number of businesses use these location directories, as do economic developers, and this is what they're looking for: contact information, available properties, market data. And these are the things that are mattering to them. They are things like the cost of labor, transportation infrastructure, quality of life, and energy costs. Those are all important to them. And we said, okay, well, where are they getting the most valuable information and communications on the corporate real estate side? What type of information is it that they want? Well, this is a bit of a surprise when he says, okay, well, what is the most effective way of communicating with them and getting them information? Economic development organizations' websites came out ahead of meeting with them. I mean, is that somewhat shocking to folks? It seems to me like that people would say, I would prefer personal interaction, but in fact, no, the online experience, I think what I suspect is that's about the issue of convenience and time. They can do it when they want. So I'm getting heads nodding, and some of those folks who are site selectors in the room. The biggest change from our surveys in terms of what is effective with site selectors and corporate real estate pros is online advertising grew the most of anything. And what I assume is happening here is that in fact there's a shift in what advertising is becoming. So there may have been, maybe the way people perceived advertising in the past is like, you're watching a great sitcom and a commercial comes on and it's just interrupted your experience. You just want to get to the next part. But now in an online world, advertising is being delivered at that moment of relevance. So you're actually getting a message from someone about something you care about and you're trying to solve at that moment. So I think that that's a reason that online advertising has increased in value to the people who are making decisions about where they either start up or expand or relocate their businesses. This is the information that they like to have on their economic development websites: demographics, labor force, incentives, major employers, maps, land sites, buildings, inventory, and infrastructure. Again, looking at differences, what has changed over the last 4 years, they're also looking for more information on the businesses that are in your communities and actually doing transactions online on your websites, everything from licenses to permits and so on. So I may have another new volunteer because so many people have gotten embarrassed by answering these questions wrong. Yes, and your name?
Pat McDermott with New Hampshire.
All right, so by the time a long list of locations is selected, how much more have corporate real estate pros communicated with your website compared to your economic development organization? Is it 24%? Is it 87%? Or is it 133%?
It's a tough one, but 133.
Again, we're now 3 for 3. So what we're interested in figuring out is, okay, when are businesses making contact? And so blue, this is the line when they actually make contact with a body in an organization, direct contact, phone, email, whatever the case is. Green is when they're visiting the website. And what you can see is that there's more contact happening with the website than there is the person. So the space in between, the delta, is lost opportunity cost. If you're not able to provide the information, many of the communities are getting eliminated before they know they're even being considered. So, so this is an important trend, and I mean, we've been hearing this from site selectors saying, we don't even have time to talk to all the communities as we're doing the initial analysis, but the numbers back it up. Here's some what I would consider to be somewhat discouraging news that came out of the survey. As we looked and said, when would you first contact an economic development organization? So gray is 4 years ago, blue is this year. What you see is there's less contact being made, especially even during the period where they're doing an analysis of the shortlist. I'm going to show you the survey results in a different type of chart. So blue is 4 years ago, blue dashed is 4 years ago, and solid blue is now. And so basically economic developers are being reached out to less. 4 years ago, when you get to the point of an analysis of the short list, 99% had made contact. Now it's around 90%. Yes?
as a site selector,
Uh-huh.
the most frustrating thing from a website for economic development corporations is the contact email address. Majority of the time is info at such and such, such and such. There are so many EDO websites that I go to that I can't find an email for a contact person. Really, I have 1 or 2 questions, and the email can answer it in 5 minutes. But I get this the info at is the killer of all going to a website and not getting anybody.
So what he's talking about actually raises a pretty interesting point, which is the issue of what you're doing online is supposed to be a funnel to facilitate the personal contact, right? Because that's the opportunity where you can provide the highest value to each other. This chart isn't actually looking at the online piece, but this is just the actual making personal contact. Perhaps, I don't know if we're getting better or worse, economic developers in terms of being able to make those connections online to offline. But this is concerning, I think, in terms of the utilizing economic development organizations' services. In terms of the website features, these are the things that for you in economic development, this is what is creating the highest value and effectiveness. Land, sites, buildings, inventory, labor force, demographic, infrastructure maps, major industries, staff directory. So here's a voice saying that's very high for him, the staff directory, so you get to talk to somebody. In terms of what's coming next, what's in the future. So green is what people have, blue is what they're going to have. So staff directory, 93% have a staff directory. Isn't that interesting? There's 7%. Maybe you want to contact us, maybe you don't. Kind of what's the point of having a website where you can't actually make that next leap into being able to talk to someone? But there's another 3% that are going to add it in the next 2 to 5 years. Blue is showing where the greatest growth is going to happen. And there, it's not the things at the top, it's the things lower on the list. Things like social media, testimonials and success stories, GIS map tools, videos, and mobile. Mobile actually being number 1 in terms of what's coming. Interactivity is a big issue. When we did the survey back in 2007, about a third of organizations had major interactive features, maps, site selection assistance, and demographic reports. So we said, okay, well, probably what's going to happen is we're going to get to that tipping point of 50% in the next 2 to 5 years. As we came back to do this 4 years later, in fact, that's exactly what's happening. We're not at the point right now where the majority of economic development organizations have interactive features on their website, but we're awfully close. So it's going to be something that now organizations are going to be at a competitive disadvantage if they don't have tools so that the businesses can help themselves. This is an example. Where's my friend from Minnesota?
Here I am.
All right. So this is an example of her website where they can actually do analysis online about a location. This is mapping businesses by industry. Also the change of the expectations of the value when this was done 4 years ago. 77% of corporate real estate professionals said it was valuable. Now it's 81%. Within 5 years, about 76% of economic development organizations will be providing these type of service. Here's some good news from the survey. 4 years ago, 29% of organizations didn't even track what was happening on their website. They put this investment and had no idea how it was doing. Now that's 2%. That's a good thing. People are actually a little bit less active on how much they're updating the websites. So social media. These are the types of social media that economic development organizations are engaged with. Number 1, Facebook page. This is not like a personal Facebook profile, but a Facebook page for the organization. Twitter account, LinkedIn groups, video sharing, LinkedIn discussions, blogs, and photo sharing. And this gets to the issue of activity. So the things that are being used the most are Twitter and Facebook, then followed by LinkedIn. And then in terms of effectiveness, LinkedIn ranked the highest, followed by Facebook, video sharing, Twitter, blog, pushing. And it's interesting to look at blog in terms of the effectiveness, because I'm going to show some data from the site selector side, which shows where we may not quite be in alignment. And also the fact that LinkedIn, which has been the most effective, is not, it's in the top 3, but it's number 3 in terms of the social media tools that people are using. So site selectors and social media. So this bullet right here is one of the most shocking things I think that we got out of the entire survey. We had no idea how much people were using it. And this is for work, it's not for personal use. How much time are people actually spending online for work using social media? Site selectors are spending 23 minutes a day on average. And economic developers are spending 26 minutes. I thought maybe this number, maybe it might be 10 minutes. I thought it's completely reasonable that it might be 5 minutes. But I mean, this is a pretty significant chunk of people's day on social media. And the site selectors, 61% agree that it will grow in importance in their jobs in the coming years. And also site selectors utilize LinkedIn and blogs more than economic development organizations. So this has policy implications for you in terms of how you're spending your time and where site selectors are going to get the content. You know, not a lot of economic development organizations have blogs. So in terms of benchmarking, so as you're benchmarking location decisions in economic development, it's not quite as easy as benchmarking sales. It's not a consumer good, it's people. So by show of hands, so which of these is the correct ranking of how economic development organizations benchmark their success? The first options is job created, announced projects, capital investment. Second is announced projects, job created, capital investment. Third is capital investment, jobs created, and announced projects. So by show of hands, who thinks which one of these is correct? So everybody wants to vote for blue, yellow, red. If people vote by party line, you just want to red. All right, so in fact what it was blue. So jobs created, number 1, capital investment, number 2, and announced projects. Mostly what folks are getting measured on is the jobs that they create. And I want to come back to this issue because there's implications of what this means for us. Okay, so now let's rank, benchmark how organizations are benchmarking their market. So option 1 is leads generation, recall of organizations, site visits. Option 2 is no benchmarking, company locations, leads generated. Third is businesses contacted, RFP sent, and website traffic. So again, by vote, everybody gets only 1 vote. Who thinks blue? Who thinks yellow? Who thinks red? Most think red. In fact, it's yellow. So this is not good news, guys. The most popular benchmark is we don't benchmark. So all of these dollars, these are valuable dollars, right? That are going into influencing folks about your community. And number 1 is, well, we don't track it at all. I mean, wow, that's got to change. You're going to get what you measure. It's followed, though, by company locations, which makes sense, and of course, leads generated. In fact, I think company locations is much farther down the process than the marketing piece, because you've done the whole deal, right? That's the marketing, that's the sales, that's the whole process. So this is the part where usually the presenter takes all this complexity, brings it together, and puts it, provides it to you in a neat box, wrapped up, where you know exactly how to move forward. I'm not that presenter. Instead, what I'll bring you is some conclusions and confusions. Hopefully, it'll bring you both clarity and chaos. So some of the things, the overall things that we found is, in general, organizations are feeling better about the value of the marketing that they've done than ever before. Clearly, we're turning the corner to a better place that people are feeling better about. The other is that on whatever side of the equation that you're on, whether you're on the corporate real estate side or economic development side, websites are really an important communication source. Online advertising growing in importance and experience value. This is an opportunity. Again, it's people matter. The relationships that we have, those things are just powerful. We are in a relationship industry, and no amount of technology is going to replace the value of a relationship. Also, if you are targeting specific industries, you need to understand, are you talking to the right people? Because site selectors and economic developers, there is overlap. There's also spaces in which there is, there's not a meeting of the time. For economic development professionals who are trying to reach site selectors, understand that they're using LinkedIn and blogs more than you are. And we need to change. I mean, with scarce resources, and many of these are oftentimes public dollars, we need to be accountable for the money that we're spending. We must benchmark what we do. So one of the questions which it raises, if we get what we measure, are we measuring the right things like jobs created? So if jobs created is our #1 benchmark, but we're also not measuring marketing, let's think about jobs. So this also comes from that same analysis that Business Facilities did. They looked at the issue of kind of where the jobs are. Manufacturing, which are the top 3 focuses of different types of manufacturing and economic development organizations, you can see the jobs have been flat. So if you're trying to figure out, okay, we're going to get measured by jobs, and there's not new jobs getting created, it's a bit of a quandary, right? So how do you solve this problem? I'm sorry, with manufacturing, actually, it's less. So you're really kind of fighting for something that is disappearing. This, by the way, has nothing to do with output. The US is fantastic in manufacturing output. This was talked about yesterday. We're #1. But the jobs that are required to do that manufacturing is decreasing. Whereas business services is more generally on the incline, but has been flat the last few years. So if you're going to get measured on things, figure out where you've got the best opportunities of being successful. Another question is which comes from the issue of alignment, is, are economic development organizations, site selectors moving apart, together, or both? Because it can happen when you look at data that all of these things are happening at exactly the same time. It can be all of these. Or maybe a more pessimistic view is, are site selectors and corporate real estate professionals getting diminishing value from economic development organizations? Is that a reason that they're talking with you less? Or another question is, are economic development organizations spending more money? Because you saw the focus on marketing is growing more toward the site selectors. Are you doing that because you're not happy with the results that you're getting, or are you spending more in a futile effort because their targets are in fact diverging from yours? And then another, I guess this is somewhat optimistic, is, are site selectors and the corporate real estate professionals, are they missing out on value from the economic development organizations through not having that contact? So depending on how you're looking at it, and I'm not here giving you like this is how it works out. It could be all of these things. I'll close with a final gift. For those, we have a limited amount, but in the back, there's a lot about how to do effective online economic development, and I'm happy to assign those books for you, at least for the number that are available. So with that, I want to close and open it for questions, but I'm going to flip it on you. I'm going to start with the first questions. Which is, and I want to throw this out, so I have two questions. One for the, actually, let me just start with the site selectors. So for some of the site selectors who are in the rooms, the amount of time that you're spending on social media is, to me, unexpectedly high. maybe it's not high, maybe it's low, and what we're gonna see in the future is even more. What are the types of things that, and by the way, I don't see him in the room, Jason, he's not in the room. Jason actually talked about the ways that he's using social media in the process, but what are some of the other folks in the room? How are you using how are you using social media in the site selection process? Yes.
You know, I blog periodically, not as much as I would like. I write a lot of articles for different online magazines as well as magazines, and I send those articles out, whether my Facebook business page, my LinkedIn page, or just through popping emails, clients and prospects of articles that I've written that I feel like will touch what they're looking for, what they're needing, but also just articles that I've read that I haven't written, snippets of those, so that way they can kind of see what their competitors are doing or what's out there, whether they utilize me or not, they need the information.
So some benchmarking information.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyone else? Yes.
I would say that LinkedIn allows you to build a network of contacts that you haven't really necessarily done business with yet, but if you're going to do a project in New York City, I might network a little bit with an architect or a general contractor or somebody that I might end up using, and it allows you to build this network that you could activate real quickly. So you could connect with people that you haven't had an opportunity to do something with, but it gives you that opportunity right there.
Jared?
Yeah, I use it in several ways. I mean, one is for my own marketing purposes, just as Jeff was describing. Second, I participate in a variety of LinkedIn discussion groups, Economic Development 2.0 and so on. It's an interesting way to stay in touch. One way I don't use it is to join the LinkedIn pages of economic development organizations. I get requests, but I don't have time to follow all of the LinkedIn pages that I get asked to join. So I don't join those until I actually have a project, when I anticipate having a project that's going to be looking in that area.
So if he joins your LinkedIn group.
At that point, I'm calling. I think Jeff's comment about people, I would say, I've been telling them for years, put your phone number on your website.
So what about this other kind of, I would say somewhat discouraging? Are we moving our economic developers and site selectors? Are we, I mean, obviously we're moving mostly in the same direction, but are folks feeling, or can somebody explain to me what's going on where these numbers are decreasing? Do you feel like you're having less contact with site selectors, and for the site selectors, are you, what's going on? Yes,
I
Bud.
got one question, maybe it's just an observation, particularly when I worked for the state, and then there are a lot of people that worked for 30 years that are retired, that were economic developers, where people may not know, and I've said this weekend, when he started, he may have had a mimeograph machine and a landline phone. He certainly didn't have any of this technology, but I think you're right, the more technology I have, the less I communicate, the more I do this person-to-person stuff, which is just much more valuable. But I don't know if in that data, maybe we're not getting as much contact, we're just not getting any of us. The young ones are, I consider myself young, but I'm not. There's no farm team for economic development for a lot of states. You just kind of figure out that that's what you're going to do, and you wait for somebody to retire to find a spot.
So maybe it's just simply a numbers issue.
Right, it may be a numbers issue, but
I think he had Zenit first, and I'll.
All right.
It's also possible that it's a reflection of a buyer's market where there are just fewer projects that are being vetted. I mean, I would imagine in the downturn, you can focus on the core as opposed to casting the widest net.
Yes.
I actually find it the opposite, that I'm actually talking to more economic development directors, especially if I have their email and contact information. more so email, because a lot of times we're having so many conference calls and meetings with my clients, and they're popping me with, when you have, especially I work with a lot of call center companies, back office operations, there's always people trying to say, how about this market? How about this market? I heard this is cheap, or I have this is incentive. So I can just pop an email to an EDO, say with a quick question, not with a PowerPoint presentation they're gonna send back to me, just a, hey, I heard such and such is closing there, or I heard this is opening, or I heard you have 2,000 call center employees, is that true? They know we have 3,500, so now I get that answer back, and I'm actually on the call with my client, emailing and contacting EDOs on a certain market that my client has asked about, and I have the answer immediately because the EDO is available, he's checking his email, because more work in life is done on email, on it as way more than making a phone call. I call prospects.
Yeah, so in your experience, it's really actually going the opposite direction. You're using that.
For me personally, yes.
One of the things that I think we'll do is we'll dig into this data a little bit deeper to figure out if this is, because like I said, sometimes averages don't tell the story. Things can be moving in two different directions at the same time. Matt?
I've got to wonder if it's a little bit like a lot of your surveys were showing. We've gone from a garden hose information to a fire hose information. And from a lot of folks, 5 years ago, getting that newsletter via email was great because you could keep up with things. But now, like Jerry's comment about it, I get so much, I can't handle it all. I'm not going to read that newsletter. It goes straight to junk mail now. So maybe the social media aspect from the EDO's perspective is here's a little bite as opposed to a full meal. Take a little bite at a time. And that tends to be a little bit more helpful. The downside is are you an outbound issue or are you an inbound issue? Are you the one that's putting information out there hoping somebody's going to find it? Or are you focusing that and trying to develop it more specifically?
Last comment on
Who does really well if you look to other EDOs and benchmark? There's some cities that are out there heading like, for their website, hits on all points.
A good question. I don't think there's any one that is everything. There are a number that are doing some really impressive things. Minnesota is the one that I showed. Actually, they're doing some nice things in that state. State of Texas is doing some really good work. Maybe that's something I can send out to folks, as some good examples of folks who are doing it right. We open it up for questions. Yes.
How do you see us working more on the international markets? Because right now this covers the U.S. quite well. But we deal with South America, we deal with Canada, we deal with China. You see these markets opening up into more internet markets.
So I think to the issue of the balance of high tech and high touch, that the more our focus is global, the more we'll be relying on the high tech. Because a lot of the folks in this room are my friends, and they're just road warriors. They're exhausted road warriors. And there hasn't been one conversation I've been in this entire conference that didn't include somebody being unhappy about flying. Okay? Everybody love it? By raising hands, everybody loves flying. No. So I think what you will see more and more is this issue of probably there's a trade-off in some of the face-to-face meetings, but that it's augmented by more and more advances in technology that feel more personal. So people are doing video conferencing and things like that. And also being able to provide information on demand. I think that's going to be, I think there will be more on-demand economic development and site selection, where you're providing the services and the tools that businesses need so they can help themselves. And also more multilingual. Yes?
I'm Alice Solomon. I'm the Select Rater of Philadelphia. I raised my hand for benchmarking. Number one is jobs created. My question for other economic development organizations is basically, right now, we count the number of jobs we created because we touched the project. Is that what other organizations do, or do they benchmark themselves on the region or the state and how many jobs are created? Because some of those are created based on marketing efforts, and they may not have actually been able to document the touch.
No, that's it. You all are going to need to respond to that.
We ran into a pickle. We're funded by the city, the county, and our municipally owned power, water, and sewer. And the city wanted one measurement. The county then said, okay, you say things are going well. We want you to stop counting the ones that you touched and tell us all of the stuff that's out there. So then we collected all of that. And then 6 months later, they said, you're reporting on stuff that you didn't touch. Stop doing that. So we just shut down the pipeline pretty much and went this, 3 very simple things without the sub-layer of data, just because politicians and what we do don't always get along.
So I will close there and thank you all for your time. Happy to sign the books for you.